Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Azure Backup and Disaster Recovery webinar. This is the third in our series of training webinars all around Azure and how to use it and get the most out of it in your environment. I'm your host today, Kevin Vogel. I'm lucky enough to have Jason Milgram, an Azure MVP that works here at Champion and Message Ops, that's going to be going over all the different things about the different ways to use Azure as a backup target, the services that are available, and also disaster recovery. Now, we're going to be breaking this down into different sections. In your GoToMyMeeting application, you'll see a section for questions. We're going to be answering whatever questions you might have as we go. So all you have to do is just type a question in the question section. We'll try to hit them at the end of every session, and as time allows, we'll answer as many questions as humanly possible. And with that, we'll kick it off. And like I said, we have Jason with us today. He is an Azure MVP, and he has been since 2010. He's also certified in the Enterprise Mobility and Security Suite that runs in Azure. He's an MIT Sloan School of Management graduate, also University of Cincinnati. I think that's the Bearcats, isn't it?
Yep, you see Bearcats.
Look at that. See, that's pretty good. And he's also U.S. Army Reserve veteran through '98. So with that, I am going to turn this over to Jason, and we'll get going on with the training. Jason, it's all yours.
All right. So you're going to go ahead and make me the presenter?
Oh, okay. You don't want to show these slides here? Or
oh, right. I forgot about those slides. Yep. So we've got two PCs in front of us. Okay. So yeah, hello everyone. Welcome to the Azure Backup and Disaster Recovery webinar. This is the third in our free Azure webinar training series.
Unlimited too. We're not limiting this to any number, so it's just the third in an unlimited number of training courses.
Right, and we do record each session. So afterwards, you'll get an email with a link to the recorded session, so you can watch it again and again, and share it with friends and family.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, he's going to give you a lot of tips and tricks in this thing, and sometimes you can't remember them. The nice thing is you can pause and rewind and play it back again, and I'll tell you, I do it all the time because I'm learning as you're learning, and some of my questions are really going to be some of your questions because I know what you know.
Yeah, and I guess for the tips and tricks, the last session we did on security, there I gave a lot of tips and tricks. This is going to be, I think, more straightforward. I'm just going to walk you through. We're going to set up some Azure backups. We're going to do some site recovery, which is the Azure term for disaster recovery. But I guess first I'll just back up and explain this seeing eye chart. And the whole point of this is, you know, Azure's became generally available in February 2010. It started with 3 services. It's over 90 services now. And it spans everything from DevOps to software development to infrastructure, and that list goes on. And again, when it first came out, it had 3 data centers, and now it has data centers in 40 regions around the planet. So Azure's grown quite a lot, and you know, businesses, organizations, and governments are taking advantage of the infrastructure and security goodness that you get with Azure.
I know when we first started with, and we started with Office 365 and then really kind of grew into Azure, but when we started 8 years ago, there was no one in it. I mean, I don't even think Azure was around 8 years ago, and you said 2010, so it wasn't. So, but then when it became about, it was slow, but now I can tell you, we got more and more customers every day moving workloads, real workloads, not just test and dev and things like that, but real workloads into Azure almost every day, and they're doing it across the globe. So like you said, 40 different data centers. So go ahead, let's just go over the agenda.
So yeah, the agenda will cover Azure Backup, and that covers a number of different things from file and folder backup to Azure VMs to on-premise servers and application workloads. And then we'll head Azure Site Recovery, which is disaster recovery, and I'll demo it using an Azure VM, and I'll also show how you can use that on-prem as well. So it's a lot of material to cover. Some of it will get detailed, some of it will just keep a high-level overview, but
Let's go.
As soon as you make me the presenter.
I am doing it right now. Now remember that you guys can ask questions all along the way. We are going to take a break between each one of those sections that he has told you about. So all you got to do is just type it in the question section, and I'll make sure that we get to them at the end. There you go. It's all yours, Jason.
All right. Sounds good. All right. So I'm logged into the Azure portal, and that's what you should see on the screen. And before we can get started with Azure Backup or Site Recovery, I'm going to go ahead and create a recovery services vault. That's where all the magic starts. So in my navigation on the left-hand side, I'm clicking on Recovery Services Vaults. Now I have a couple created already, but we're going to create one from scratch just so you see how that's done. I'm clicking on Add, and I'm going to give it a friendly name. We'll call this the Azure Webinar, and it doesn't like my space, probably doesn't like the uppercase.
So is this like a repository?
Yes, this is the Recovery Services Vault, where your Azure backups and site recovery instances and orchestration resides. So I'm choosing my subscription. I'm going to create a new resource group for this, called Azure Webinar, and I'll choose where to put it. So I'm going to put this in West US 2, and we'll go ahead and create it.
Now, by picking West US 2, are there different pricing depending upon the different data centers that you go in with Azure, or are they all pretty much the same?
So it depends where in the world you're planning on setting up, but the US data centers, it's the same pricing.
Oh, okay.
All right. So that's being spun up right now.
Well, maybe we should ask these guys a poll question, because you know, when you're setting up this backup, I'm sure that these people are probably using some type of software today to back up their environment. Why don't we try to find out what they're using today and see if that will also work inside of Azure.
Okay.
So let's launch this. You should be able to see a question in there. So if you could pick, you know, one of the companies out there, or more, if you back up with multiple companies, that's fine, so that we can figure out, you know, which ones you're using. Wow, a lot of others. So I don't know what another is, but I thought I picked the popular ones there. We'll have to figure out what the other guys are. But you know, these are the ones that, from a traditional standpoint, a lot of people are using in their environment. So I think we have almost 100% response there. So. So just so you know, I mean, Veritas got 13%, Commvault got 9%, Veeam got 35%, Barracuda got 13%, and then other was a whopping 64%. So pretty cool on that one. Let me just ask them one other question while we're doing this.
All right.
Is, you know, where are you backing up your data? Are you backing it up to tape, disk, a cloud of some type? Or you're not backing up at all. So, and you can see that most of the people out there are doing it to NAS or SAND or disk drives. Some people still using disk, and cloud is wow, I'm surprised. 57% of the people are using some type of cloud. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Wow, and no one's not backing up. So that's a good thing.
That's good.
Okay. So I will let Jason get back. We got a couple more poll questions along the way, but this gives us at least a basis for you to discuss how they can use these vaults that you're creating.
Okay, yeah, we can throw in another poll question if I forget what I'm talking about, or
you need a second.
Right. Okay, so I created a new recovery services vault, and I called it Azure Webinar. I'm going to go ahead and open that, and I just want to kind of walk through the navigation. Here we have the overview. Activity log is going to list all of the kind of admin activities for that resource in Azure. Access control, you can assign individuals or groups specific access to the vault. Again, it's mostly admins who are going to be touching this. Let's see. But then we have getting started, backup, and site recovery. So two options there.
So what is this, like a wizard? So if I'm going to back up, I click backup and it walks me through a wizard?
Yeah, well, that's the great thing about the Azure portal. It's a configurable, clickable interface for setting up all kinds of different things in the cloud. So let's go ahead and click on backup, because I'm going to hit backup first. First choice is, well, where's the workload running? Azure or on-premise? And what am I backing up? So as you can see, there are a lot of different things on-premise that I can back up.
Wow.
I'm going to do files and folders for right now, because that's the simplest, and we can do it very quickly.
So like a file share that's sitting out on my premise location.
Yeah, can be on a server, can be on a PC, laptop, doesn't matter.
Okay.
Now, as you can see, you can also do backups of various servers. Hyper-V, VMware, you can do application workloads as well. Those all require you to download and install the Azure Backup server because it has to do kind of a little work on-prem in order to manage the backups. Not hard to do, but as far as demos, we'll just do file and folders for right now.
Is there an agent that has to go on those application servers like Exchange or SharePoint or anything to be able to be backed up live?
Yes, we can look at some of those options after this, because you can either do it Azure Backup Server standalone, or if you're already using System Center, there's an extension you can add to System Center to continue to manage those.
Oh, okay, great. The other one I noticed was Bare Metal Restore was on there. So you could back up a whole system and be able to restore it from Bare Metal, right from Azure?
Yep. Absolutely.
Holy smokes, okay.
All right, so I'm doing file and folders on premise. The first thing I do, step one, is download the agent for the server or for the client. I already downloaded it.
Okay.
The next piece I need to do is get my Vault credentials, and these will only be valid for 2 days. That way, if someone finds this file later, they can't just use these. These credentials are what's going to connect the backup agent to this particular backup vault.
Okay.
So I'm going to go ahead and download that.
Just the initial connection.
Right.
Okay.
This is like the security handshake.
Okay.
And let's see where it put it. Put it in downloads. Good. All right. So let's go ahead and install.
Boy, when you said this is a live demo, you weren't kidding. You're taking it from
this is hands-on. I mean, you can rewatch this as well as go through other tutorials and implement all this yourself. So we just created the services vault. I'm now going to set up backup for my machine. Then we'll do some servers. Couple choices here. Where's the agent? Where's the scratch file? The scratch is where, as it's creating the backup, where it temporarily stores it. So as it's loading,
it's like a cache file.
It's a cache file.
Okay.
No proxy settings here. I already have the .NET Framework and PowerShell
installed.
Yep.
Yep. Hey, at least you didn't wait for that.
Right. Oh, that would have taken.
That would have taken a long time.
And this should launch momentarily. But actually, while this is going, if you want to do another poll.
Well, the next poll is more about disaster recovery. I was going to wait till we get to that section of your training, and then we'll ask those questions.
All right. Well, I'll tell this to go faster.
Let me just see if there's any questions anyone's asked while we're sitting here. Okay, and John has asked a question. Microsoft DPM.
Yes. So yeah, this can integrate with your Microsoft DPM solutions, and actually I'll show you an example of that coming up. All right, so it finished installing. So the next step is my Vault credentials. So this is going to connect the agent to the Vault. And let's just make sure these are the ones from today. It's validating. Next. Oh, and this is important. Now this is, again, file and folder on-premise backup. Can be a laptop or a server. You have to create a passphrase. And you need this passphrase if you're going to do recovery. Microsoft doesn't keep a copy of it. It's up to you.
Oh, okay. So it's like a passcode, but they call it a passphrase.
Yes.
Is there a restriction how long it should be?
It has to be at least 16 characters.
Okay.
And as far as where to drop this, I'll just put it there. All right, so now it's registering the agent. And again, this can be on a server or a PC.
Right.
It's registering this Azure Backup agent with the Recovery Vault or the.
Okay. Now, is this strictly for Windows-based machines? I noticed that you're saying a server or a desktop. What if they had a Macintosh or a Linux server or something that was not Microsoft?
Right, great question. So for the file and folder backup, this is for Windows operating systems.
Okay.
However, with the if we're backing up VMs in Azure or other VMs or servers on premise, and we're using the backup server, it can be Linux, it can be Windows, doesn't matter.
Oh, okay. So this is using the CIFS protocol to back up because it's files, or is it using NTFS, or is there a certain protocol that it's using for this?
I'd have to.
I don't know. Okay, good. Well,
That's a good question.
Hey, I stumped them. You heard it. By the way, you heard it first time.
All right, so I just launched the Microsoft Azure Backup agent, and we're already registered with the server, so let us schedule backup. And again, it's a wizard. It says, okay, add items. So here I can select volumes, I can select files, folders.
So right now it's looking at the host that you made this connection with on premise.
Correct.
Okay.
So, and I already created a folder to have a single image in it, but I'm going to back up the whole folder. I could select multiple folders if I wanted, as well as entire drive volumes. But we're going to
make it quick. Yeah, you don't want it to last forever.
Now, this is important here, and we're going to look at this again because it has an important impact when we get to virtual machine and server backups. It's what is your backup policy? So I'm going to back up daily or weekly, and then how long do I keep these? So for simplicity, I'm just going to uncheck the monthly and weekly, and I'm going to say for the daily, I'm only going to keep 7, and for the weekly, I'm only going to keep 4. And what that does is it trims off all the backups you don't need. For instance, if you have a backup of the entire week, you don't need all 7 days of those backups. And then once you get to a month, that's the entire month. So it helps you keep the amount of backup, reduced.
Well, and also the storage you're using up in Azure to keep the price down.
Right. And the other things I just kind of whiz by, those by default you're fine, unless you're again going through proxies or have to set up some additional rules. So it's creating the backup schedule.
Now let me ask you a question. If this was a laptop, let's say, and you're sitting in the office the first time you back this up, but you take it home and you're at home when the next time it schedules a backup.
Okay. Let me just show one thing.
Okay.
So I set up a backup schedule, but I don't care about that schedule. I think I set it for Sunday at 9 a.m. I'm not sure. But I want to do a backup right now. So I clicked up here. I clicked on Backup Now. And it's saying, okay, you pick the whatever I had selected before. Now this is the first time it's backing up. So even though it's a small amount of data, it's going to take a little longer to set it up because it's capturing metadata. Again, this is, you can do point-in-time file restores. So the first time it's collecting a little extra information. I'm sorry, but what was your question?
My question was, if it was a laptop, and the first time we did this, I'm sitting in the office and everything goes great and da-da-da.
Yep.
But now I go home and I'm working from home and it's time to back up my unit.
Okay.
Will Azure find my unit no matter where it is on the internet and back it up?
Right, because the agent is installed on that device, so it doesn't matter where it is.
Oh, so a person that's mobile, that's traveling, that wants to make sure their files are backed up, this is a great solution for them to just be able to make sure that all their files are up in the cloud.
Absolutely. All right, so the job completed. All right, so I've done my first cloud backup. Let's say I lose that image,
right.
Or it's an Excel spreadsheet and wrong data has been put in, and I need to go back to the version from 2 weeks ago. You know, whatever the case is, okay, I need to recover data. So I'm clicking on recover data for this machine, and I'm doing, instead of a volume, I'm doing individual files and folders. Now we've only done one backup here. So I only have one
to choose
point in time to restore from, but you could have multiple. It allows you to go and pick the date and time. And what it does, it creates a mounted drive of that backup of the particular volume or folder or files I selected, and lets me choose from those which ones I want.
So if you got hit with one of these malware viruses,
yes,
or one of these ransomware where they want money to give you your data back, you could come in here and say, delete all that out, give me yesterday's before this thing hit, and just restore right back to yesterday's data.
Yep. All right, and here's that mounted drive, and here's my folder, and here's the one image I had in that folder. All right, so that's how you can do file and folder backup for PCs, laptops, or servers running Windows. Now, we walked through all that because, one, I want to show everyone exactly how to do it, but it's going to apply to some of these other examples. We're going to do entire server backups.
They're going to take a little longer than one file, though.
Yes, and I did some ahead of time, so I'll show you how to kick it off, and then we'll go and actually see what it would look like, you know, once it's done. So let's go ahead and close that agent.
Now, I noticed you got status there and everything. It was successfully backed up. If for some reason it didn't successfully back up, would you as an administrator get a notification that something happened?
Yeah, you're looking at my screen, aren't you?
Yeah.
You probably see alerts and events underneath there.
Oh, I didn't see that, but there they are.
Premonition.
Yeah, I figured it was coming.
Okay, so yeah, in this navigation we have getting started, which we jumped to. But as you can also see, we have monitoring reports where you can look at jobs, whether they're current or previous jobs. You can do backup reports, backup policies. You can look at the protected items. So the answer is yes. And let's say we just did a backup job. We'll have to move this. There we go. Close that again. There we go. Protected items.
One. I see it.
Right. So that's the agent I just ran.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to come back and look at that. But first, let's now look up at backup policies, because this plays an important role. We looked at a very simple one for doing file or folder backup. But if you can set up multiple backup policies and how these apply to 2 VMs, 100 VMs. It's very easy to do mass backups of your virtual machines. But the policies are important because it will have an important impact on your storage costs.
Speaking of storage costs, I think Dwayne has a question here for us. Hold on one second. He's talking about 2 terabytes of, okay. This is kind of a longer one. On average, with the Windows Server and 500 gigabytes, how much do daily backups retain for 30 days? The server with 2 terabytes kept for 7 days. Not sure what that means.
How about
we'll get it at the end?
Yeah, we'll finish the backup policies, and then I have one slide, and then we'll cover some of those questions.
Got it.
All right, so when you're creating a backup policy, you give it a friendly name. You can have multiple policies that you can choose from for certain servers and VMs. Again, it comes down to how frequently do you back up, when, what's the retention range. So for the daily, so let's say for daily I want to do 7, and then for weekly I want to do 4 weeks, which takes me for a month, and
Right.
for the monthly, let's say I need 13, and for the annual, let's say I'm required to keep backups for
7.
3 years.
Okay.
So I can put in a number there, and that creates a backup policy, which I can apply as I'm starting to do backups of virtual machines. So with that, it's letting me know it went ahead and finished creating that policy. Let's handle some of those questions, and let's get to start backing up some VMs.
Okay, let's go through here. Oh, sorry. Okay, let's see what we got here. So Dwayne asked this: on average, for a Windows server with 500 gigabytes, how much do the daily backups retain for 30 days?
Okay, so I think that question will apply directly to the backup policy. You can choose how much of the data you are keeping. And again, it's going to vary if you're doing a file folder backup versus an entire VM snapshot, which we're going to tackle next.
Oh, okay, good. Well, then Dwayne, you should get an answer there. So let's see. Jarek asked, no notification settings, and I think we're going to get into notifications coming forward right on our alerting.
Right, so, well, let's look at that right now. So alerts and events, I can set up backup alerts and site recovery event alerts. So let's say I want to configure the notifications. I'm going to turn email notifications on. I can put in multiple email addresses separated by a semicolon, and then say notify per alert or just an hourly digest, and what am I including? Critical, warning, or just informational.
Okay, so absolutely, so you get everything.
Yep.
All right, so Cole wants to know, where do I find the cost for this recovery services vault and or the pricing for the backup recovery?
All great questions. So let's actually demo those.
Okay.
And we'll look at the pricing.
Okay, let's get on to the next session so that we don't get too far behind.
But I will show you exactly where to find the pricing so you can calculate everything. All right, so Azure Virtual Machines. Let's go ahead and do a backup of that. So let's see. I think I created this one. Now, let's do it through Recovery Vault. So we created the Azure Webinar Recovery Vault, and I'm going to do a backup. And instead of on-premise, I'm going to do Azure, and I'm going to do a virtual machine. And I'll switch to the new policy that I created. It goes over that policy for me. I'll say OK. And here is a virtual machine I created earlier for this demo. Now, I could select multiple virtual machines.
Right.
In this region and resource group, I just created one. We go ahead and select OK, and it looks like it's ready to go. I'm going to say Enable Backup. So now it's working. Now, there's two parts to setting up the VM backup.
Okay.
First part just takes like a minute or two. The second part, for this is an A1 VM, an Azure A1 size.
Okay, so it's a smaller one.
It can take about 30-35 minutes. So I did one earlier, and I want to show you what that looks like. So I did that in Vault Test 2. And let's show you what those jobs look like. Okay, so this was a different server I backed up. So again, I'm backing up the entire VM.
Right.
The first thing it does is it configures the backup. And you can see here in the duration column how long it took.
31 seconds.
It took 31 seconds to do it. Now, to do the actual initial backup, that took 35 minutes to do.
Right.
Now, once I have it backed up, you're probably asking, well, what can I do with that backup? So in this navigation, I'm scrolling down from monitoring reports down to protected items. So I'm clicking on my backed up items.
Right.
In this recovery vault, I have one VM that's been backed up.
So one we just saw.
Right, it gives me the date, the last restore point, because you can pick from a number of restore points.
Okay.
Now here, you have the options of force it to do another backup right now, because there's a hurricane coming. We have 2 days of new data. These are scheduled to do a backup once a week, whatever the case.
Right.
But
back it up right now.
These are the two exciting options. Restore VM, which I can restore the VM entirely, or I also have a file recovery option.
So you can dig into the VM.
I can dig into the VM, and specifically, maybe it's just one drive on the VM.
Ah.
So maybe I don't need the whole VM, but I need that entire drive. It's a data drive that had all the databases running.
Right.
So I can click that, and again, I'm picking the date and time, and again, you do a mounting operation. So very cool. And so you can quickly and easily do a backup of an entire virtual machine. This is one that's in Azure. It takes a little bit longer than we have time to demo, but you can do it on premise to that whole list of Hyper-V, VMware, bare metal, etc.
So, for instance, if I had a laptop, I'm on the road, I delete a file by accident and flush out my recycle bin, and then all of a sudden I go, oh, geez, I forgot. I needed that file for my presentation tomorrow.
Right.
You could go back into your backup, recover just that file out of yesterday's backup, and you're back in business.
Absolutely. Okay.
Can an end user recover files, or does he have to be an Azure administrator to be able to do it?
All right, great question. So if you're running the individual agent, like I had on this laptop, you run that yourself.
Oh, great.
But for the VMs, it's whoever's been given access to that tool. And it can be a variety of folks or people with different roles who have various admin access.
Okay.
All right, so let's do another quick break and talk about Azure VM backups and questions that we got before. And just to add, because there are lots of questions, if we don't get to yours now, we'll definitely we'll get back to you through an email response.
I promise. Okay. Is there a minimum bandwidth requirement to restore files? It just takes longer to restore them. For instance, I'm at a hotel Wi-Fi. It will still work. It just might take a long time, right?
Right. So there's not a bandwidth requirement. Well, there might be a minimum level of bandwidth required for it to work. I'm not familiar with what that is, but the kind of flip side of that question is you can set up throttling so that as it's doing backups, and when you specify the date and time, that it doesn't exceed a certain amount of bandwidth of your own network.
Okay. And then, okay, so let's see. I know there's no. Jeff asked, when you were selecting the file and folders options before, I saw system state. What does that exactly mean?
Okay, so that's right. You saw bare metal. Right above it was system state. And system state it's the operating system, but it doesn't include, I think, like the registry. But let me show you, a good way to, quickly answer those questions, because there'll be more questions that we won't be able to get to. So I'm on the Azure website, azure.microsoft.com. I'm clicking on products, and I'm going to storage, and then I'm clicking on backup, and I'm clicking on documentation, and let's see, system state, how to system state and bare metal recovery.
Okay.
So, because I don't remember everything all the time, and there's so much, I have to look up stuff all the time myself. So I also just want to show you, sometimes how do I get the answers, because I had a vague memory. But so system state backup backs up the operating system files so you can recover when the computer starts. But system files in the registry are lost, so they're not part of the system state. And it goes on to more details for the bare metal.
Okay. Somebody asked a question here, and he says, I might have missed this. Are these backups differentials, incrementals, or full backups? And I think the answer is all of the above, right?
All of the above. And let's see. So on that same section under Overview, on the very first section under Overview, they actually kind of walk through here, comparing full, differential, and incremental backup. So the answer is yes, all of the above.
All of the above, just depending upon how it's configured.
Right, and plays a more important role once we get into site recovery, which I'm going to demo next.
All right, just two other quick questions.
Yeah, and this.
Where does the backups reside?
So the backups reside in the recovery services vault that you create, and you can create one or many of these. You don't have to have many. And you choose which region the vault is in.
Okay. And
then also the storage that's being used. You can just use storage just in that data center, or you can actually have it in geo-redundant storage. So even your vault is backed up in multiple locations.
And there's a price behind each one of these too, right? I mean, like, so for instance, just standard blob storage that's real inexpensive is a way to go. And then if you want geo-redundant, it gets a little bit more costly, right?
A little more, not too much. And cloud storage is relatively inexpensive for what you get. It's automatically backed up and load balanced and clustered.
Is there a data transfer charge to do that?
That's a good question. So the data transfer, whether you're backing data up or pulling data down, there's no cost for that.
Okay.
So Azure Backup, no data transfer costs, because you're already paying for the service and the storage.
Right.
So they say, okay, we're not going to charge them for transfer. But that goes back to an earlier question about the cost. So an easy way to find out the costs of any of these things, again, I'm going to product categories, I'm clicking storage, I'm clicking.
So you're on Azure.com.
Azure.com.
Okay.
And on that subcategory page, I have pricing details and documentation. Pricing details. This is for Azure Backup. Site recovery has a different pricing, and we're going to walk through site recovery next. So essentially, if what you're backing up is under 50 gigabytes, then it's $5 for that endpoint plus the storage.
Right, a month.
A month, correct. Right. So you pay per instance fee and then the storage consumed.
Okay, that's pretty easy.
Yep, and then we'll show site recovery, and then we're going to demo that. So site recovery.
Can you answer a question for them? Can you clone a VM with backup, or is that a different thing in Azure?
So the backup will do a snap, will be a copy of the VM.
Right.
You can do, if you're restoring the VM, there's a number of things you can do with it. Something else with site recovery, you sometimes we just use that to actually perform migrations.
Right. Okay.
But here, so site recovery pricing is different, and again, it's per instance. And so let's say we're doing Azure Site Recovery to Azure. It's $25 per month per instance that's protected. So let's see what that actually means.
Well, in fact, I think there's a great time to ask a poll here about disaster recovery, if that's okay with you.
All right, sounds good.
We have one, and we just want to know, do you have a disaster recovery program in place right now? So I'm going to launch this real quick, and you can see, yes, fully implemented and tested, yes, in progress, no, but on the schedule, or no, I don't have one right now. And there's a lot of people that, to be honest with you, disaster recovery is a luxury sometimes.
Yeah.
So we're getting some really nice response. Just so you know, we got 44% of the people say, yep, I got a disaster. It's fully baked and tested. 31% of the people said, yes, it's in progress. 16% no, but it's on the schedule. And 7% of the people said, no, I don't have one right now at all. So great question, and thank you very much for your answers. Okay, we'll save these for the end.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so let's get on to the really exciting stuff. Site recovery, also referred to as disaster recovery.
Okay.
So site recovery is you have a machine, it's on-premise, or in this case in Azure, and you want a running live cold version of it.
Okay.
That stays synchronized with all the changes that are happening to the production one, so that if there's a problem of some sort, you can fail over to this other one that's in another data center.
Okay. And can you set your RPOs and RTOs, in other words, how far behind it is and how often it gets updated?
Yes, you can manage all of that. And again, disaster recovery used to be a pretty expensive endeavor. And as you saw per instance, it's not anymore.
Right.
And it's very easy to set up. Now, as far as the types of machines, we're going to do an Azure VM site recovery. But you can do this with bare metal, Hyper-V, VMware, doesn't matter. It can be running anything. It doesn't matter if it's a Linux box, Windows box.
It's got to be an Intel server. It can't be a mainframe or
right,
a Unix box.
Right. It's not going to. It doesn't work with like IBM AS400s
right.
and things like that.
Right. So it's got to be an Intel or an AMD processor, but it can be bare metal. So it could be a physical server.
Right.
It could be Hyper-V. It could be VMware.
Right.
Great.
And I'm going to show you 2 different ways that you can do this now, because they're working with the interface and trying to create a couple different ways to do the same thing. So the first, I'm going to open up the actual service vault, and I'm going to scroll down to getting started, and instead of backup, we're going to do site recovery now. The first thing is for on-premise machines, prepare infrastructure. So if you're going to do an on-premise site recovery that's, it's going to manage the orchestration, you do have to install an agent and a machine on site. We're going to skip that and just do one that's already in Azure, because it's, that's the amount of time we have for demoing.
Right.
So I go right to step 1, replicate application. I have to pick my source, and I'm picking the source location, and trying to remember if this is what I was going to select. Let me think. No, we're going to pick one from, right.
Having 40 data centers is a great thing until you have to figure out which one you want to be in.
Right. Let me think. Oh, I set up so many VMs for this. All right, so within the vault, let's see. I think it's in South Central. You know what? Let me just check the VMs that I have real quick. So virtual machines. All right, so I have one in South Central and one in East US to do. All right, so site recovery, replication, configuring the source. We're going to do South Central.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I keep on picking the wrong one. All right, I'm going to do it the other way. Then we'll go back to that way. So you can do it through the services the recovery vault, or right from the virtual machine. So right from the virtual machine, let's go to VM number 6. and I'm going to choose disaster recovery right from the VM.
Wow.
So
Okay.
this is new. It is in preview, but it works, and it should be coming out of preview shortly. Now the difference is I'm doing this setting up the disaster recovery right from the VM interface instead of the recovery vault.
Right.
But it ends up being the same thing, and I'll show you what
Right,
that
just a
looks
different
like.
way in.
Right. So I picked the target. So where is this virtual machine going to reside? So this one I created in the West US. The disaster recovery location can't be in the same data center.
Right, that doesn't
It
make
has to be a
sense.
different
Yeah.
one. So it's picking, these are the places I could put it. I'm going to do East US 2. I choose, what the resource group, if there's availability set in the virtual network that it's going to be in, storage, etc. The retention policy that it's going to use. And if you keep on scrolling down, it's going to do this little map.
Wow.
So it knows, okay, this is the one I have that's in blue. These are the different ones I could choose to do my disaster recovery copy to. This is the one that's currently selected. It wants to know, okay, enable replication. I'm going to say yes. And now it's validating. Now the validation can take 15 seconds, 30 seconds, maybe it could take a minute. So as it's doing the validation, and I have some of these already done,
Right.
so we'll go back and look to see what happens in the entire process. But as we're waiting for that, do you want to do another poll?
No, but let's see if there's any questions while it's doing that, because I know that people have been asking questions, and these are long ones too.
Okay.
All right. Would it make sense to have your disaster recovery outside of Azure so you don't have everything in one basket? I'm trying to set up site recovery, but as part of the prerequisites for installing the Azure Site Recovery
Unified.
ununified, okay, setup, this is a long question. It requires Strawberry, Perl, and all this stuff. My current physical server already has Perl, and I am not able to install the agent. Is there a workaround?
Oh, okay. That got into a bit of specifics, but as far as the first part of the question, the thing with Azure is there are lots of different data centers to choose from for where the site recovery target will be. So it's really about not putting it all in one basket. It's just choosing what are the site recovery locations that make sense for you.
Right.
And with that, it did create the validation. So I'm going to jump
Perfect.
back in.
Okay.
And let's take a look at that. So again,
Don't worry, Rick. I'll get to your question next. I promise.
virtual machine 6, disaster recovery. We scroll down. It's and that went to vault test. So let's go ahead and look at the vault test. And let's look at current jobs for site recovery. So site recovery, it just started a new one. So as you can see from these date time stamps, it's creating the initial site in progress, and that's with 2:47 p.m. So it just finished that, but it has more steps to complete. So earlier, I had set up one much earlier this morning, and you can watch, see the steps it goes through. It creates the site, it creates the protection container, it sets up the network, it maps the networks, it does the replication policy, finalizes it. So there's a number of steps that it goes to create the initial DR site. So what it's doing is it's creating a VHD of that server in Azure. And that's essentially kind of all of the data for the server, but it's not actually a server yet. Now what happens after this, and you set this up in your the replication policies, is how often does that server get updated, synchronized?
Right.
Because, okay, we just did a snapshot of it, but it's in production, it's going to have data changing in it all the time. So you can set up, let's say, does a delta sync every 4 hours. And
so, but looking at these times, it looks like it's doing a lot of things, but they're all quick. It's not, you know, it's a minute here, it's 8 minutes there. I mean, it's not like a whole day process to set this up. It looks like, you know, 15, 20 minutes, and you're set and ready to go. Is that about right?
Right. Some of the steps take longer than others, and this is just getting the whole site set up. Now, once it is set up, one of the things that you can do, so going into that vault and scrolling down to the protected items, instead of backups, these are the replicated ones. Here is a server that I did site recovery on earlier into another data center.
Right.
And your options here are, I could click on this and do a failover right now.
Oh, okay. Or a test failover, I see.
Right. Because who wants to actually, I mean, you can do a failover, but now before you do that, you can
Let's make sure.
do a test failover. And you can then log into the server, run it, make sure everything is
And not interrupt your existing environment.
It's not going to take over, it's not going to change the actual production location. Allows you to validate everything.
Oh, that's cool.
Now, when you're done with the test failover, you would then be able to click this, clean up test failover, and it'll get rid of the test VM.
Right. So you're not eating up any of that space or anything else.
Right.
Now, to one of the questions I know that a person asked was, if I do a physical, if I back up a physical box, can I turn it into a VM and power it up in Azure?
Yes. So when you do the failover, it's going to take that VHD and hydrate it into an actual virtual machine.
Wow.
And that now is your new production machine. So one of the tricks of the trade here, this will be one tips and tricks, is Microsoft recommended, and this is what we use a lot of the times, not all the times, for doing migrations, but we use the site recovery tool to migrate VMware, Hyper-V, bare metal servers into an Azure VM. It's now running there in production, then we turn off the DR service because we don't need it to go back to on-prem.
Oh, okay. And I know that, you know, you offer, your team offers a lot of services around backup and disaster recovery. I mean, if people need someone to help them plan this out and actually even do it for them, that's kind of what we do for people, isn't it?
Yep. Do that.
That wasn't an advertisement. I just want to let you know that's
no, definitely not an advertisement.
Okay.
All right, and there are a couple questions I want to get to on this as well, because where was it? There's been a bunch. So there's a question from Terry asking, how easy is it to resize a VM which we failed over to? So for those of you familiar with Azure VMs, you can resize them anytime. Change the number of cores in the memory. Now, when you resize it, you know, it's going to power it down and power it up with the new cores and memory. Right. But I think, you know, his question's very interesting because it's getting. What happens if you don't want the new VM, the to-be hydrated VM, the exact same size? Let's say, well, we ran it on site and we only had 2 cores, but I really wanted 4. So you can actually do that. And
now, is that while you're bringing the image over, or?
No, you have to get the first snapshot in.
Okay.
And after that, this VM that's been has site recovery enabled for another region.
Right.
Now it's just doing periodic delta syncs. But here, this one I just opened, you click on Compute and Network. And here, this is the source machine. It was an A1, 1 core, 1.75 gigs of memory.
Right. So
Let's say, you know what? If and when I ever do fail over, I don't want it to be that, because I always wanted 2 cores for that.
Right.
So I know that's, Terry, not exactly what you asked, but first, with an Azure VM, you can resize it anytime, and if you want, you can change the target to be a different size than what actually the VHD the server itself was running.
And you can also give it a different IP address if you wanted to, it looks like.
Yeah. So when you set it up, you would choose, hey, you'd set it with the same internal and public IP address, which will come live and it'll turn off the other one. So yeah, when dealing with production switchovers, especially for on-premise, there's a little more work to do. But I demoed site recovery with an Azure VM because it was something we could, perfectly spin up with a brand new services.
All right, I know we're getting down to time here. It's 2:55. I would like to ask them 2 questions real quick, if that's okay with you, Jason.
Yep.
We're going to continue these webinars on education, and I'll tell you the reason we did this one today was because the last webinar we asked the audience, what would you like to see in the next one? 70% of you told us, I want to see around backup and disaster recovery, so that's what we did. So I'm going to hit you with a poll here on what you would like to see next. Everything from dev and test, databases, Azure automation, which is a big thing out there, Power Apps and Logic Apps, or Azure managed services that are available. So this way we'll take your feedback and we'll try to make sure we give the one that gets the most response here. Right now, with about 40% of you calling in, we have 15% at dev and test, 36% at database, 54% at Azure automation, 29% at Power Apps, and 45% at managed services. So, we got a nice mix here. Nothing jumping, but it looks like either automation or managed services might be the next one to go with here, Jason.
Yeah, and we listen to what you tell us, because the first one we did was kind of an intro to Azure, how to set up virtual network and VMs, and during that one, everyone said, hey, security. Right. So we did two sessions on security, and then from there we asked again, and most people said backup and DR. So
perfect. All right, and I just have one more question for them. Would you like an Azure assessment? And this is something that could be funded by Microsoft. We will obviously find out prior to. This way you could see if it's something you guys might want to do. And the nice thing is, most of the time, Microsoft pays for it.
Yes.
So we don't mind that too much when Microsoft's paying.
Right. I think the client likes that.
Yeah, especially since they usually are the one paying Microsoft.
Right. Yeah. In this case, they get it for free.
Right. That's not too bad. So I'll give this just a couple seconds here. Is there anything else? We got 3 minutes here. Jason, anything that you want to just make sure that we covered? Let me check the questions.
There were a bunch of questions on costs. I think we kind of covered that, but I do want to just switch back to the slide on site recovery. If you're doing site recovery to Azure, it's $25 per month per instance that's protected, and on that above it, it says Azure Site Recovery to customer-owned sites. So you can actually use Azure Site Recovery as the orchestration tool to manage your site recovery to another site you own. Maybe it's a rack in a data center or another office building. It doesn't have to go into Azure. And if you do that, it's a little less per month because you aren't taking up additional resources in Azure.
Right.
So that's actually, if you've already invested and you have racks in another disparate location, you can just use to manage all that.
Now, and I also know, and I'm going to stop the poll now, thank you very much. I know that those of you that are using existing software for backup, VMs or the others, a lot of them have tie-ins to Azure and can use Azure repositories to back up or hold your backups up in Azure. So if you need help with that, we help people do that with a whole plethora of different software products. We'd be more than happy to help you there. Okay. Just a couple quick questions here.
Yeah, one was on security.
Okay, go ahead.
I just want to hit that. So back on the site, again, just on that overview page, there's more detail, but like somewhere down here, storage, security. So this goes into detail on the network security and then the data at rest security and what's supported and what's not. So yes, data in transit is it's done with AES 256-bit encryption.
Okay.
But you know what? Yeah, if you go to this product subpage, there's more details in other sections, but this gives you kind of a nice overview.
For those that asked, we are recording this, and anyone that registered for this webinar will be getting a link within the next 48 hours of the replay of this, and you can play it back, like Jason said, as many times as you want. We try to make sure it stays available, and you can even look at our 101, our initial introduction to Azure. You can look at the security, the 2 different security webinars that we've already done. They're going to be out there on the same site. So this way, you can actually build a library for those of you that want to teach maybe some other people in your organization on how to use Azure.
Right, and they're going to get a follow-up email that'll have links to this recorded session and the previous recorded sessions, right?
Right, yeah, Jessica, we'll send those to you. It's probably easier just to send you the URL. I promise, we'll be putting them in there. For those of you where we didn't answer your questions today, because we just have run out of time, I promise we will. We have all your questions documented, and we will be answering them as we go. Jason, I do want to thank you. I thought this was a really good one today, and I hope you guys appreciated it, because I did. And look for the next one coming up. Like we said, it's probably going to be around automation or managed services. Those look like the front runners.
Maybe we tie it into both, because we'll figure it out.
Maybe we make it an hour and a half next time and then do both. So we'll let you know. Thanks for your time today, and have a great day.
All right, thanks everyone. Bye.